By sharing our Catholic beliefs, are we imposing them on people? What's the difference between proposing and imposing? We'll talk about that and more now on Finding Communion. Hello, welcome to Finding Communion. I'm Rosemary Ford, editor of Parable Magazine. I'm here with Bob Dunn, the Director of Public Policy for the Diocese of Manchester. This podcast and the Parable column of the same name discuss the Church's work in the public square and the intersection of politics and faith. Today, we're here to discuss Catholic social teaching in the public square and why we share Catholic ideas and beliefs with the world. Bob, let me ask you a slightly facetious question. Where do we get the sheer audacity to share Catholic social teaching with the world? After all, there's a separation of church and state in this country, one that's at the heart of who we are. Are we trying to create a theocracy here by sharing our Catholic beliefs with everyone?
Well, as has often been said, nature is a theocracy, but the government is not. And the Catholic Church sees that the political sphere and the religious sphere of life are independent and autonomous. So the church does not teach that a theocracy is the way that things should be. And that's consistent with a scriptural view of the relationship of rulers to citizens. We even see, for instance, in the famous chapter in Isaiah, which talks about my anointed Cyrus, referring to Cyrus as the anointed. Here's a pagan ruler that's being referred to as my anointed because Cyrus is acting justly and in a way which is consistent with what God wants to have happen. So from the Judeo-Christian perspective, the important thing is not that the ruler be somebody who is a co-religionist, but rather that the ruler acts justly in a way that accords with God's law. So the Catholic Church does not seek to establish a theocracy. If we're seeking to impose our beliefs on the rest of society by our participation in the public square, then I am doing a really bad job because oftentimes the arguments that I go up there and make are not ones that prove to be winning arguments.
Mm-hmm.
As you said earlier, and this is a reference obviously to what Pope John Paul II said, the church can only propose. It can never impose. And that's pretty obvious when you think about it. In New Hampshire, for instance, you've got to convince 201 members of the House and 13 members of the Senate that the arguments that you're making are the correct ones. We, as the Diocese of Manchester, just like everyone else that's involved in the advocacy efforts in Concord, need to make the arguments and hope that they prevail. But all we can do is lay out those arguments and then let the legislature make the final decision about what should happen.
Sure.
So it's really respectfully absurd to suggest that the Catholic Church is either seeking to or could impose its beliefs on the rest of society. The arguments we make are based on reason. We spoke in an earlier podcast about the relationship between faith and reason. And so hopefully what we're doing is speaking a language that is consistent with what everybody can understand and what everybody can agree to. That's one of the things that we have to contribute to the discussion in the public square.
Yeah.
We're approaching it from the perspective of defending human dignity and the common good. And that angle is an angle that maybe isn't being put forward by anyone else or few others. And that's the contribution that we've got to make in Concord and wherever else my colleagues are doing work in this area.
Bob, as you just mentioned, a lot of times you'll be up there testifying in Concord, and speaking about things that, maybe some people would see as a lost cause or something that's not going to be popular with people, but yet you still persist and you still share these ideas and talk about them with people. Why do you do that? And why is that important?
The Eucharist tells us that we're supposed to bring Christ to others, that we're supposed to be missionaries and credible witnesses to the gospel. And one of the ways that we do that is through our work in the public square, whether it's the work that I do or the work that individual Catholics do when they contact their legislators as being a way of carrying out that mission and trying to make sure that those sorts of perspectives and values are being brought to the attention of legislators. So it may be perceived sometimes as a lost cause, but I always feel that there's always a chance to prevail in the legislature, and that it's important that the legislature keep these things in mind as they're making the decisions. Human dignity is at the root of everything that happens in Concord. It's implicated in one way or another in almost every piece of legislation that gets filed.
Mhm.
And it's important for legislators to think about the implications of the bills that they file and the bills they vote on from that perspective, as well as from a more down to earth perspective, which is the approach that they normally would be taking anyway.
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering how other religions, when they speak out about these issues too, fit into these sorts of discussions and what roles they play when, they're proposing things as well. What's your experience with that? And how do you see other religions either complementing what we do or also, or maybe even, opposing what we do? But like, how does that fit into everything that we're talking about here?
There are certainly people of faith from different religious perspectives who participate up there. It tends to be more individual clergy people or folks who are from a particular faith tradition that are there as individuals. The Diocese of Manchester is one of the only religious entities that is regularly participating in these discussions. And that's not surprising to me because, for one thing, we have a relatively large organization and we have the ability to be able to devote resources to that sort of thing. We also have the value of Catholic social teaching. I just read an article recently that noted that the Catholic, this was written by a non-Catholic, but it
Mhm.
was applauding the fact that unlike any other religious group, the Catholic Church has Catholic social teaching to fall back on. So we have a structured, organized, tried and true corpus of teaching that can guide what we do in legislatures and in society. And no one else has that sort of thing, was the point that this individual was making, and I think he was probably correct. So that gives us a great advantage when we go into a discussion about legislation because we can know what it is that we should be saying, what it is that the bill is really all about if we look at it against the backdrop of Catholic social teaching. Now, you might say that, well, that's imposing your beliefs, right? Because you're
Yeah.
imposing Catholic social teaching on other people. You're expecting us to subscribe to what Catholic social teaching says. And the response to that would come from Catholic social teaching, which is based not just on revelation, but also on reason. The Compendium of the Social Doctrine of the Church, which is a digest of Catholic social teaching, was put together at the behest of Pope John Paul II, says almost right at the outset that this body of teaching is put forward for the consideration of every person of goodwill. It's not just to Catholics, it's everyone. And the reason that the compendium can say that, the reason that Catholic social teaching can say it, is precisely because it's based on reason as well as faith. So I said at another point that we need to, when we're in Athens, like St. Paul, we need to speak Greek instead of Hebrew.
Hmm.
Well, Catholic social teaching is written in Greek and Hebrew side by side.
Sometimes literally.
Yes.
That's a great analogy. And that's a fascinating discussion, as always. Thanks, Bob. Thank you for joining us on Finding Communion. Please check out our show notes for more on these topics. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.